to enter that primordial state, that Wu Ji, is between the breath in and the breath out, resides the primordial mother, which is perfection. The only question you have is your glass half empty or half full? Unity, the primordial mother, is everything. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Now, this epiphany is the very knowing.
When Shakti decides to get to work on you, she's like... When emotions coming up, what should people do?
We must always look at the breath. Something as powerful as a 9 count drawing in, holding for a 9 and exhaling for a 9.
Some people just keep taking that turn that keeps them rooted in their identity and not choosing to step into that higher self-awareness.
This is what we call chi packing, absorbing the riches. Then you're no longer feeding from this very limited vessel.
San Qing is a Taoist master and a profound healer. He has over 30 years of experience of guiding people, teaching people, opening people up to their true potential as a human being, as a light being, and just being. San is an ordained priest and 66th generation lineage holder, as well as the 126th generation lineage holder of Taoism. San is a Taoist master of Qigong and Nigong, and he's a prolific channel and a healer who has built a reputation for direct access to the spirit realm. He says he's grateful every day to his teachers, the 3 pure ones and the Tao, for allowing him to witness miracles. San works with people all over the world, showing them that the impossible is possible.
So I have today with me San Qing, and I'm telling you, there is nobody better if you want to know about the Taoist way, what the Chinese esoteric path is to becoming your highest, becoming the highest version of yourself, becoming, attaining your highest potential. I'm not sure there are too many people on this planet who can tell us more about it than San. So San, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for introducing me and inviting me in this conversation, Smita. It's a real pleasure to be here. I really have a fond affinity for your messaging and what you offer right now. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much. Indeed, San does work with people all over the world, showing them that the impossible is possible. So I really connect with you on this, San, because frankly, that's what interests me. That's why I do this work, get the idea of the impossible, literally taking the I am out of it and saying, I am possible. It sounds a bit cheesy, but I feel like, that's the whole soul journey. What's your view on that?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so much to build on from that. It really does. It's like when you identify as no place, no person, no thing, you come to a realization that you're all things and nothing at the same time, which leads us down that Taoist path of self-realization. So, deeper inquiry, deeper knowledge, deeper curiosity creates hope. And from that hope, we develop a belief system. From the belief system, we create the knowing through these set experiences. So I always like people to fall back on, as the old expression would say, the method to the madness. There's a method behind your self-inquiry, and to validate that, you must be able to replicate it, or it becomes a transitory sort of psychological state that separates you from the now moment.
How is it different from the psychological state? Now, there is psychology and then there is the Tao. Right. Tell me about the difference between the two.
Well, I always go back to this, and this is sort of a historical evidence-based scenario where psychology, the discovery or inquiry of the mind, dates back several hundred years. It's very infant in its representation. It's not something that has had the ancient roots that you or I have studied in and mastered in, that have been collectively nurtured and handed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, which is the intuitive state of knowing. So psychologically, you would create a form, perhaps potentially what we call misaligned within the Taoist path, to be realigned. So you have these epiphanies where you may hear a voice, you may see an apparition, you may get a dream that turns out to be said future experiences. Furthermore, we can take it to a much deeper lens. But this type of stuff is where people get stuck in their mind, their psychological state, and they're not able to generate a validated experience.
So what you're saying is actually the Tao can take you beyond the mind in a way which the mind kind of gets you stuck sometimes. You can have issues going on in your life, maybe issues. I don't know whether you believe in past lives or not, whether that's a part of the path, but the fact that, consciousness works in multidimensional ways, and that the one tiny aspect of it is the psychological mind, and that when we try to work through the psychology of ourselves to resolve an issue, you may not necessarily get the answer, and sometimes it might in fact take you into trenches of the mind and of consciousness where there's no coming out. So are you saying that the Tao can help you to unglue yourself, unprise yourself from being stuck in a corner of the mind?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think what we should share with the audience is understanding sort of like a foundational perception, so that you have building blocks that have you that self-realized state, your Sherlock to your Watson. Elementary, my dear Watson.
Yes.
You find these points, and I love that because they're like crumbs. So we will look at, what is this material? This material is electromagnetic. You have a polarizing effect that is being quite clear and is sort of representative in what people would perceive as a duality. So there is this opposing forces that represent themselves in every aspect, from action to thought to breath. You are being given the evidence of this polarizing electromagnetism. Now, the most powerful insight from a Taoist seeker is to realize unity, the primordial mother, is everything. It's not separated by the electromagnetism. So now we have to understand that there's a currency, that you are operating in this currency that is material, which someone would perceive as a realm, a dimension, as you put it, a dimensional state, which from a physicist's perspective would be a third dimensional state. Now, to obtain your access to what someone would call ascension or enlightenment or oneness, which is the unified state, which we call the Wu Ji, the primordial mother, you must realize that from a Taoist, we look at this reality as a bellows. Everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Now, this epiphany, that charge that you're getting, Smita, the charge of electromagnetic pulsation, this unity that we're having, the commune that we're having right now, and it comes in the form of that visceral, expansive chill that you get, is the very knowing. This is the state we speak of. And so, most people are like, well, what is he talking about? Well, this is a sensory perception. And as you develop these skills, you start to be able to identify and see these things. And this is a union. This is what happens when you're on that path of self-mastery. And as you acquire that, you start to realize, okay, the currency is electromagnetism. We are unified. We want to find that primordial state of knowing all things. Because I always remind people, if you're thinking you are not knowing, if you're knowing, you are feeling. That feeling will be realized through this path of self-mastery within a Taoist path. It's the alchemical process, the deeper nature of the electromagnetism within this physical flesh, that you use that currency. And once you get to a certain point, when you observe and realize that everything is contracting at the same time and expanding at the same time, okay, that sounds absolutely confusing. A lot of, my students are like, well, Juffa, what is that? That's insane. Absolutely not. Because if you take a pause, the simplicity of the breath is representative of what we perceive as yin and yang. Yin and yang is the deciphering code to all things within this reality. And when you look at that, you look through that lens, you get the merging point, the vesica, the center point, which is the Wu Ji.
Interestingly enough, you can only get to non-duality, the unified state, through duality. There's no getting around it, is there?
No. And I mean, that's the beautiful part about the mastery, about all the things you teach and all the things that I teach. It's about realizing that you are now. That when you are absent, and this is where we pass over what we call the point of no return within Taoism, to enter that primordial state, that Wu Ji, is between the breath in and the breath out, resides the primordial mother, which is perfection manifest. And so when you look at your reality, we would give you the lens of everything is light to wave to matter to particle, realized with your attention, intention, forming from the cloth of perfection, distortion from my dear friend, Buddhist monk, Martin, he calls it the dukkha. You create from this electromagnetism distortion, which comes in the evidence of energy. And that energy is vibratory. It has a frequency. It's frequential. And when you acquire the resonance of that, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes, it will. And that lies this evidence base of that unified state, the primordial mother, because when you cross over that threshold where you detach yourself from your personality and attach yourself as the primordial mother, guess what happens? Every thought, every feeling, every state, good, bad, indifferent, is an expression of the primordial mother.
All at once. Sometimes all at once. I relate to that because I think when you're on the path, I find that when you're really clear in your intention and your commitment and your actions are consistent with that one doesn't think about like, oh, now I'm transforming myself or now I am learning this or that or the other. It comes to you. It uses you. And so what happens is you don't know that you're being used by something, as in like it's working itself on you. And so I recently, just now, as we speak, I don't know if it's visible in my space right now, but I've just had a recent phenomena where I thought I had very deeply dealt with a particular aspect of my life, and I found that that's true, and that in that commitment to whatever's left over, huge amounts of emotion has arisen, like of its own accord, not meaning to I'm not thinking about it. I'm not, going there. It's just what shows up. Events, circumstance, situations show up that you just can't avoid having to deal with. And you think, now, okay, how do I do this? And what I find is that when Shakti works on you, as you're talking about the yin, when Shakti gets to work on you, you don't have a say. With consciousness, you can have a flow with it. You can actually somehow still manage the flow. You can guide, you can navigate your way in the flow. But when Shakti decides to get to work on you, she's like, do you relate to that?
Well, of course, there's every Taoist has a path of self-realization through the lens of the electromagnetism. This is the currency. We must identify that. That means the human condition is evident, and this is how you are able to perceive your path of misalignment, to realign yourself. As you put it, the flow, as our dear friend Bruce Lee coined that back in the 70s, the flow state per se. It's sort of like very, very spiritual these days. It's quite an interesting expression. We refer to it as Taoist as Wu Wei. So once you enter the Wu Ji, the primordial mother, which is perfection, you're able to hold that resonance, that frequential state, and then create from that what we call Wu Wei, which is effortless action, effortless effort. This is the currency of the now that then commands the imperium of all things. So now you have access. Now, no matter what it is, whether you perceive yourself as personality, whether you perceive yourself as less of, it no longer is of any consequence because everything is transmitted within this frequency of perfection. So synchronicity, serendipitous events is just the currency you operate in. That's your reality, your default. You are not separate from anything. You are the now. So now we speak back and we revert back to the mental state, the psychological state. You are always being pried from the knowing that your mind is all things. And so the second you merge back into that, If you think it, it becomes realized. Manifestation, healing, magic, all these things become realized now because you are no longer separate. You are the now moment.
Just absorbing what you said. And I think that now moment state, San, is so profound. It's a state to be experienced and not to be conceptualized. And I think one of the things that I'm not sure, I'm not the only one, but what do you recommend to people that are in the midst of, of feeling overwhelmed with an issue in their life? What do you recommend with people who are, not able to influence sort of what we would in psychology would call it the network of conversations that, we live inside of other people's opinions and perspectives, and they talk to each other, they shape, and then, you can't go and speak to a gazillion people. You can only keep showing up as yourself. You can only keep showing up being yourself and so on. But, sometimes it's overwhelming when people are experiencing their own emotions, their own flow, their own kind of unveiling of where their soul journey is taking them. And then there are other people as well to deal with. So how do you bring people into their center in those situations?
Very, very amazing question. This is the story that happens to everybody. First you wake up, you realize I'm being controlled by something. What might that be? Well, when you start identifying the recipe of your reality, it's a thought, feeling, and an emotion. Maybe perhaps not in that order, but they're the basic ingredients of all things. If you take a moment, you pause right now, you look back, you look to your future, you look at the present moment. This is the very ingredients that create your reality. Now, what do we do with that as a seeker, as a Sherlock to your Watson? How do you create from that self-evidence that you are beyond the human condition, that you're beyond the state of basically the electromagnetism, because this is the dukkha that continues to repeat itself. When you create Imperium over that, all of a sudden you can transmute the thought, emotion, and feeling instantly into the frequency that is embodied as one. So all of a sudden, a lot of my students tend to go, I can't believe it. I'm an accountant or a judge or a janitor, but understanding how to master your emotional state is like the very reprieve that's necessary for anyone that is being humbled by this seemingly impossible conquering of a hill too high to climb, is that emotional state. Yet when you acquire that ability, it's like you're like Spider-Man. You shoot out the web, you grab it, and you move it off the screen. Furthermore, if it was a computer, you would look at your icons, you'd click on the icon and remove it off the screen. And then all of a sudden, I'm not controlled by this emotional state. Now, people say, is that sounds impossible. Oh, absolutely not. When you start to get down to the currency and you realize that it is electromagnetism that is this very currency that we work in, you start to look at this is electric, this is magnetic. In of itself, if you just couple the brain and the heart and the simplicity of the neural pathways of the physical body, you can start to acquire harmony, what someone would call coherence. But furthermore, the deeper you go, the more you pass this point of no return, as we speak of. It doesn't matter what state you're in. It always, the frequency returns you to the mother. Now, this is where I always want to suggest and promote the mastery of the alchemical process. And so when if you identify and realize this is electromagnetism, this is the currency, that means that we must master that currency to be self-mastered. And by doing that, you get deeper into this bellows that we speak of. And as you enter that mother, the Wu Ji, you can hold that line. And the more you cultivate it, the more it becomes the default to your reality, which you will start to notice that all things fall away. that when I say detached, some people are like, well, you're not emotional because it's no longer a currency that controls
You're
your
not
very
feeling. You're not. You're unfeeling, which is the opposite of being detached in a sense. There's a true detachment comes with genuine compassion, I think.
well, becomes the actual default. So when you merge with the primordial mother, all of a sudden servitude and selflessness is the very inaction and action, and your breath, your action, your words transmute into that. You do not have to think. This is where we go back to, if you're thinking, you are not knowing. If you're knowing, you are feeling. And that feeling becomes so powerful that you don't have to attempt to process what that is. It just becomes the nature of your reality.
Now, I want to talk about feeling because, law of attraction, Abraham Hicks, and so on always say, feel it, feel the state realized, etc., etc. And I think it's all fine, except for the fact that, human beings are preconditioned. We have so much preconditioning, and a lot of what we feel is filtered through those those conditions, as it were, those perceptions and those beliefs and the whole gamut of what it is that makes a human being operate, an unconscious human being operate, or a semi-conscious human being operate, largely through that state until you become awake and you start to realize that actually, well, my feelings are transitory. Just as the clouds are drifting by, my feelings are just like that. They're not real as such. They are temporary. They are so transient that my feelings, emotions, thoughts, actually, if I am, in Vedic terminology, we would say, if I am Atman, if I am Brahman, then I am that Wu Chi state. Myself, I am that, and I cannot experience that through the filter of my feelings, emotions, and thoughts. So need to let those go. So my realization on this is that while emotions and feelings and so on, we can't escape them, and we really do need to master at least that level of our humanity. Then I think feelings are not always reliable. Yeah. The only reliable state is the only reliable feelings that we get are the ones that arise from deep within, that are from that place of oneness, that are from that place of unity. And yet, through the filter of all our past and everything else, until we can allow it, or we can catch ourselves being trapped in those in the moment by moment, we can't really experience that. So how reliable are feelings?
Well, feelings, once again, are the currency of the human condition, which you are not. As we remind people, the bellows is the reality. Everything is contracting and expanding. Man is not like that. Man is mortal. And if you identify with the flesh and blood that looks back at you in the mirror as your personality is such, you will be limited. You will be suffering, and you will be in that condition of that suffering. So with the emotional state, I love that, because it's transitory. It's very, very, it's not a permanence. When you cross that point of no return and you are all things and nothing at the same time, which conceptually for most people, until otherwise noted, you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. This lies the mastery of the electromagnetism, because once you master the energy currency within this realm, then everything is effortless, because you will obtain the Brahman, the primordial mother, the Wu Ji, and that will be the resonance that you obtain and hold, and then it starts to bleed into everything. So your default is servitude. Your default is selflessness. And so we look at things from a Taoist state. We go, okay, so the baseline is love. Love is subjective. Love is subjective until otherwise noted. So love for you might be rainbows and unicorns. For me might be rabbits and razor blades. It is subjective to the human condition.
I hope
so
not razor blades.
But we take this from this part where love has been conditioned by your path as identified such human. And so with that limited aspect, You start with love and then you progress to something as simplistic as gratitude, because you can get someone's attention and intention by just being as simple as a passing compliment, giving someone $5, saying hello to someone. All of a sudden they're identifying as this gratitude that just rises up from within them. They don't have to attempt to conjure it. It's just within you. And then, of course, we move from gratitude to accepting and allowing all things. And that is a resonance that is sort of part of the path of a Taoist seeker. We normally go through 9 levels of physical body, energetic body, spiritual body, sun body, earth body, moon body, oneness body, ultimate body, and then being. And that chill you got right now gave you that being now with all things, which would reside as breathing. You are the physical, energetic, and spiritual manifestation, divine word, will, light, love of the Tao. And you express that. You're not struggling with, what am I getting out of this? How do I control the circumstance with my currency? The currency is the emotional state. The currency is, with this state, I can manifest, I can heal, I can do all these things. This is the very distraction, because you will never obtain that resonance if you perceive reality in this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And yet we do get trapped in it. And I think that's the thing that I feel is the challenge for human beings, is that there are states that we tend to get trapped in, emotional states and perspectives and, agreements that we have in our world where people tend to buy into a certain perspective because there is so much payback for them to do that. Sometimes it suits everybody to have a particular point of view about a particular situation or a person or whatever. And they have that point of view because it serves everybody's needs, because it deflects from them taking responsibility from their actions. It can sometimes deflect from sharing their own life states and so on. Many reasons why people want to do, to drive the narrative. Okay. And that's what I'm talking about. You talking about something that I really chime with and I really resonate with. And I want to serve the audience, the general audience, by giving them an access, like a technical or a practical access, that when you see yourself feeling disrespected, unheard, badly treated, feeling hurt, emotions coming up, what should people do in that moment to remember who they are?
When you want to take the simplicity of that and rewind and merge with the primordial mother, we must always look at the breath. We must always look at the breath. And the breath is said evidence of the yin and yang. We don't perceive things as a Taoist. We don't perceive things as up and down, in and out. This is the very currency. And when you merge the yin and yang together, you receive that said Vesika point, the Wu Ji, the Brahman, the primordial mother. And so to look at the simplicity of the breath, we go back to something as powerful as a 9 count drawing in, holding for a 9, and exhaling for a 9. Now, this is what we call a beginning to what we call absorbing the riches. Because as you hold that breath, it's where you acquire access to the primordial mother, and it will come in that electromagnetic form. You'll start to accumulate this currency within the physical flesh, and it will be self-evident and self-realized by you. And that's where you get a huge epiphany, because hang on a second, all of a sudden it was conceptual energy. I can't feel it. Be very clear for the audience. Without electromagnetic field that is the currency of this reality, we would be dead. So the evidence of that comes in the autonomic nervous system, in the autonomous sort of state where you are not on your attention of breath, blood pumping. Your body is vital. This is active because of the unified primordial state. Now, your journey, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to decipher that through the yin and yang. Through the breath, you will find that center point and you will be able to transmute it. The more self-evidence is the more self-realization. And when you are able to move that energetic potential and create imperium over your 50 trillion cells, now the mastery starts to present itself. And it's no longer a transitory psychological state, but a place of knowing. And this is where the currency of feeling is that evidence. And it's as you acquire the regulatory harmonious state through the energy, then all of a sudden you're leading with your head, feeling with your heart, got a gut reaction. These all become a transmuted state of knowing, and they're validated that way. They're not misconceptions, distortion, delusion, but you must regulate that energy for that to be realized. And that's why when you bring up the emotional state, I agree with you 100%. Initially, you have to start at a baseline, and those emotions will control your perception. And as you master that through the energetics, they are no longer on the table. They're not on the menu anymore. And it's a very, very fast track of realization when you go through the method that we use within Taoist alchemy. And so all of a sudden now it's no longer a point of tension within your mind. You can realize that this state is now, and I am able to access all things at once now. And then it will be that express state where you'll feel that gorging. And through that respiratory technique I just shared with you, you will feel the nitric oxide build within that, the oxytocin. You will feel that gorge within your heart where you condense that breath. And what happens is when you condense that breath, here is self-evidence as a Taoist, is the compression of what we call the diamond of perfection. And that is the seed of that. So that light is coming from the void, the primordial mother. So this is the mirroring effect of this electromagnetism. So from the void, we create that seed of creation within the primordial mother that then is translated into life itself in a 9 cycle, which happens to be from conception to creation of life itself. This is the first evidence of miracles. And you go, wow.
Absolutely phenomenal. Really get that. And, there is so much synergy between the Chinese Tao way and what I have been immersing myself in for the last 30 years or so, which is, really understanding what the Vedics have tried to say, what the ancient Indians have tried to say. And people say to me, what is the secret of this and what's the secret of that? And I honestly think, I'm a yogi. I love practicing yoga. And one of the reasons why in yoga, not just, of course, the physical aspect, but the whole various 8 elements of yoga. But the key element of that is bringing the breath to every second. That if we can bring the breath to every second, then incredible well-being starts to emerge, incredible presence starts to emerge, calm. Also, the breath will when time is right, when it's ripe, it will take you into those nooks and crannies that are having you resist going further, and it will draw those things out. It will actually flush them out for you if you can be with it. And sometimes I find that when when things get really intense and overwhelming, it's really that's the only thing to do is to go to the breath. Don't do anything else. Breathe, whether you're lying down, like full body breathing, cyclic breathing, just allow it. Like as you mentioned 999, I teach something similar. And, but I have a whole range of practices that I love to do. But the breath is just the most profound and the most powerful access into this non-dual state that, and you mentioned alchemy earlier, and I wanted to ask you, in the Taoist healing and transformation, how does the refinement of qi lead to spiritual evolution, and what kind of practices can accelerate that alchemy? Because you mentioned alchemy many times already. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we're getting down to the brass tacks of the elements. So you can refer to a periodic table and realize that all that is within your reach, and transmuting that into the alchemical fun factory that is presented within the internal state. So when you start to build those blocks and what we call burn that state in, so that your internal energetic state is as palpable and tangible as your physical state, that's when we start to get magical things take place, because we merge the sun with the earth and we reveal the primordial mother as the moon, which is another transmuted state of those energies, the electric and magnetic, and they merge together. The light and the information merge together to present the perfection, the unified state. So with that, we have many ancient practices that give you that self-realization. And then, of course, the self-evidence is being able to transmute it into manifestation, magic, healing. Our magic is very deep. It's very ancient. And we go right into the fundamentals of that, using the grids within this said electromagnetism. And so all of that is built on understanding that when you become unified, you are this evidence of perfection. And so no longer are you in doubt or in lack of, which would present itself in the simplicity of, I need this, I have to find that, I've got to go on that path. If I can only just get a little bit more of this love or that attention or that object, these are all the currency within this material. And no longer will that be evident. Not to say that we're virtue signaling where someone would want to, I threw my shirt off my back. I surrendered everything to you, God. Why are you not listening? This is a very distraction delusion we call within Taoism. If you act in virtue, you have none whatsoever, which is the distraction.
And at the same time, I had this dialogue with one of my connections. Like yourself, you connect very directly into the other realms, and I have, I call it a super highway into that. And I had the same conversation, and I heard somebody say a couple of days ago that you can connect with your deities, you can connect with the beings that you connect with. I personally prefer to connect with only that which resonates with the highest frequency of light and love, and anything else is not allowed to manifest its presence through me. I'm not interested. So what I asked, he said, when you connect your deities, you should, everything will get taken care of for you. As in, like, your deities will take it when you leave everything at their feet. But you should not ask for too much. Don't ask for too much. And I disagree wholeheartedly, because I say that if you can't ask your deities, who can you ask in the universe? There's absolutely nothing left then, is there? Because often your parents can't cut the mustard with delivering, some of the basics that you might need to have a good life. So, it happens. People have rough conditions that they sometimes have to contend with. So I think that idea of connecting into that other realm and then developing and establishing that relationship as a mutual, like a grace from that side, but a mutual connection, then I think I say ask away, ask whatever you want. Don't hesitate, because that's the one place that's safe to ask, and you shall receive when the time is right. It may not be now, it may be later, it may be in another life, who knows? But it's really interesting that idea of connecting into the other realms and developing that relationship with, whomsoever, whatsoever, with your version of God. What do you say about that? Is it good to ask? Is it not good to ask? How do you relate to these things?
Well, this is a great question, because again, we look through the lens of the human condition. So there's a degree of morality, integrity moral. This is not the currency that the universe works in. The universe has no moral compass. And so as you ascend, frequentially, the evidence of that is selflessness, servitude. So when you connect with your teachers or myself, this is what we call, I don't know what that is. This is what we call, I have no idea how that happened. This is what we call facets of the diamond. So the diamond is perfection. And the dialogue that I have with my teachers is that very said dialogue with what acquires the monologue, which is the primordial mother. So it's another transmuted form of, perhaps someone would call it Akashic records, source, Buddha, Tao, God, but that evidence will be shown to you. And so whenever I speak of this, it's always this: you'll never want for money, food, or shelter. Anything you want, need, or desire will be provided for you as you are in service to help and heal others at the highest level. Accept and love all. And that message echoes time and time again. Furthermore, if you ask my teacher Latsu, he's quite cheeky, but he'll always give you this question: imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, "What are we doing today?" Fall back into the beach and be realized. And I'm just like, you can't make this stuff up. You just can't. But furthermore, it shows you that evidence.
Interesting. Very interesting. But I think that's the other thing, is that the more self-realization that you are able to move into, the more self with a capital S. And by the way, I just want to clarify for people listening that when San is talking about perfection, he's not talking about perfection from that human, like judgmental perspective. He's talking about perfection as being that state of existence which requires or begs nothing. It's just whole and complete as it is. And presumably that's what you mean by perfection. Am I right?
Of course. That's what we refer to, that from the void comes that seed of the yang, which is the compression, the hardness of the diamond. Mm-hmm. And that is perfection within this electromagnetism. And furthermore, you bring that into this state so that things that would be perceived as supernatural become supernormal.
Yeah.
And we create from that. And there are more evidence that you know that you are where you need to be. But you have to acquire that. There's a path. A lot of people are like, well, just let go of that. You don't need any of this, and you don't need the energetics. And I would say that would be a disservice to the seeker. That the method, their method, however they acquire their absolute, because if someone gives you an absolute, about face and run in the other direction. Your absolute is determined by your own self-mastery. Your knowing is the very validation of your truth. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And so,
as long as that truth is not based in ego and identity, as long as that truth is something coming from a higher perspective that is truly wishing to guide you. I think I'm just clarifying that only because I know that in the West, when we have a lot of dialogue on social media about my truth and your truth. And I think in the case of self-realization and self-mastery, the truth that you're referring to is not the truth that is rooted in, that is colored by perspective or identity, or the perspective of the identity and the ego. Am I right?
Well, yes. What's most important is there's 1,000 ways to go up the mountain. What if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. So when someone comes with, this is the construct of reality, there are, 35 million dimensions to this reality. This is how you ascend. This is what happens. This is a disservice to the individual. When someone comes in with their absolute truth, understand that there are a million ways to enter that state. And for a Taoist, you look at the mountain as yin and yang. You go up the mountain, you merge it together, and you become one with all things. Mm-hmm. And so that can be acquired through the yogi state, through the Taoist state, through the Christ consciousness state, through God, through Buddha, through universe. Yeah. What's most important is that it's not shaded. You'll see that self, that need to be approved will come within the emotional currency. So you'll find these people that need to constantly be validated. And so when, for example, something as simplistic as sensory perception, i.e., let me just talk about psychic readings, which I love to do because they're fun. They're novel and they're instant, and people get sort of like sobered to, hey, where did you get this information from? You don't know me. So, for example, if I give someone a psychic reading, I just read their energy, right? So I read their aura, I read their energy centers, and from that, I will get an emotion and a virtue, which will give me exactly the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual state they're in right now. And I read it off like a menu, and people get really sobered. So I always start from the bottom. I start with the energy, which some people would call the transpersonal point, the earth point. Then what you would consider your first chakra, which would be the root chakra. That I always start with because it gives you a very clear understanding of where the person is psychologically, whether they're creating too many boundaries, how deep they're going within themselves, that is the mind, as opposed to at one with all things. So that will be an excess of an emotion, not a virtue. And then I go to the sexual energy, and then they go, whoa, stop. How do you know that? Mm. And that's where people get sobered up very quickly, because all I'm doing is reading it off. I'm not looking for your approval. I've been doing this consciously for over 30 years. I could do it with my eyes closed 1,000 times. You don't even have to give me someone's name, and I'll give you the information, because that's how you access information. Mm. And when you don't get caught up in it, because I'm no place, no person, no thing, I'm just now, which would be the evidence of information. That's how you become realized. It cannot come in any other way, because there's so many people just talk. And you've heard this before, but I'll say it again. I'm a Pepsi challenge guy. You know, it's like, show me. I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anyone on this stuff. It's the simplicity of it. Just the simplicity of looking at the energy potential, realizing things like the pulsating auric field of an individual is said what some of my scientific friends, parapsychologists, seekers of information, they want to accumulate the data. We call this precognition. Furthermore, this is what we call psychokinesis, where you can actually present the evidence of this material and people freak out. They're like, well, I mean, that doesn't seem possible. It seems to be more of a mystical, magical state that was told to me through movies. I can't possibly experience it now. Oh, yes, you can. And that's the power of what we speak of.
When we spoke last time, I was on your channel, you suddenly saw something around me and you started to talk about what that was. I think you mentioned the Shiva energy was pulsing through. I was really shocked. I'm so not present to that around myself. It was really interesting how you were able to read what was happening in that moment, which is quite phenomenal. It's quite a phenomenal gift.
Yes, skill. I mean, it's a mastered skill, and anyone can acquire it.
Yeah,
anyone can. I'm not diminishing. Perhaps maybe I stumbled across my realization as I'm a reincarnation of another state, but it happened to me in a picosecond once I acknowledged who I am.
Yeah.
So there was a progression within my path that steadfast to that realization, and then consciously 30 years of consciously helping others find that state and be able to acquire it. It's exciting.
It's a really beautiful skill to be able to have and to keep honing. I mean, I came into life from a very young age. I've been able to see people's higher selves. And I've had to, I would get so excited. I'd meet certain people. I'd be so excited to meet them because I can, not knowing that that's what I'm relating to, not knowing that that's what I am perceiving through my Manipur chakra, through my solar plexus or through my heart center or through my third eye. Not knowing that, I would literally take that person to be, you have no idea how much of trouble it's got me into over time, because I relate to people in that way and they love it. But the problem comes when they can't maintain that state. As soon as I'm gone, that state drops. And then they have the opposite reaction to having experience. So when it happens a few times, unless somebody is operating or living into that constantly, into that state of themselves, that higher state of self-awareness without realizing or consciously they're doing it, or not consciously, but they are doing it, then the connection is incredible. But when it's not there, and I didn't learn this until really recently, like I mean, so late in life, and it's got me into relationships with people where I have believed that they are more than what they are capable of being, right? And they are at the level of their higher self, but at the level of who they are choosing to operate as at this point in time. And then what I've also seen is sometimes life keeps giving them forks. Choose this path or that path. And I've often said, I'm like, please don't go that. No. You can't save all the puppies. You say, no, go down this path. No, this is so amazing for you. You really want to take that. And then it does come across to people, especially if they're sort of close to you. It might come across as being domineering or dominating. But where I'm coming from is like, no, but I can so see what's going to happen if you take that path. It will be amazing for you. But they go the opposite direction. And then the next fork comes. And then again, so every some people just keep taking that turn that keeps them rooted in their identity and not choosing to step into that higher self-awareness. Because if they could do that, I have had that since I was a child, and I still have it. And living in the world, it hasn't always been helpful to be able to see that. I'm sure you can relate to that, because not everybody wants to, people don't get it. They don't see, people see you from the level of their own perception, at the level of where they are right now, as a level of consciousness. So it can occur as, don't tell me what to do, or I'm not going to do that. That's why as a coach, it's a really valuable skill to have. As a guide and as a teacher, it's a really great skill to have, because then people will actually find way beyond their money's worth.
Yeah, I mean, it everything is frequential. That's it. And so that currency, once you obtain that resonance, you build on it. This is what we call chi packing, absorbing the riches. And it's an accumulation. You want to saturate this physical flesh. It realizes and mimics in a mortal state. So you can stretch out your mortality within this lifetime to its maximum. And once you do that, then you're no longer feeding from this very limited vessel. And so many people, like light workers, healers, gurus, when they end up on my doorstep, they're spent. I'm a channel, I'm a this, I'm a that, okay, that's fantastic.
Ah.
I always ask the simple question, how do you feel at the end of your day? I'm exhausted. Aha. Here lies the beginning of your healing. Here lies the beginning of your self-realization, because they're using the currency that is their constitution, what they're born into this realm with.
Rather than
physical body, rather than the primordial mother.
Right.
And so when you are unable to identify the difference, you get out of the gate really fast. You get a lot of young healers. Most of them don't make their 50s and 60s because they spend their own currency. They're not tuning with the universe, the primordial mother, the Tao, Buddha. And with that, it's self-evident that their mortality becomes realized, and they don't understand. They're spending that currency. They never have to touch it.
Okay, 2 questions around that, San. How do you distinguish between one and the other?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first it starts with, we give them the foundation. You're asking about the nature of reality. We help them realize that there's a fortified state within the electromagnetism. This is a currency. You use your emotional state, but first we talk about how you're born into this world, and you have what we call a constitution, what we call Jing. Jing is the very essence of what you're being given, your hereditary disposition, your lineage, your DNA expression. This is what's being given to you within this re-up. Now, when you get in there, I always refer to as the analogy of a battery. I've never seen anyone starting off their journey with less than or more than 80% of 100, right? And so what happens is, once you acquire the idea that you can now start mastering and connecting with this immortal realized state, then you start working with the electromagnetism. And so when you start cultivating that energy, you bring your battery up to 100%. From 100%, you go up to 1,000. From 1,000 to 9,000, you are now fortifying this as immortal presence. So whenever I channel, for example, this is old school OG type of stuff, I can take a flame from a lighter and put it under my hand and hold it there for more than a moment and pull it away, and there's no damage to the flesh. This is said evidence of the transmutation at a subatomic level of immortal primordial state. And this is an old school OG sort of channeling. And I've had quite a few friends on the channel that are very familiar with this way of identifying, because they'd be traveling the world training with gurus and
so how do practically somebody watching, what can they do to, they're not going to put a flame under their palm.
Well, of course, I mean that would be a level of ascension, but in relation to identifying your emotional state, first and foremost, ask yourself how you feel at the end of the day, right? This is the first evidence for yourself to go, okay, I'm not doing that, which most people do. Let's say, for example, they approach something as simple as the physicality. I want to get stronger. I want to get leaner. I want to get, in better shape. They look at it as a formula, right? Okay, so if I eat this and I do that, I'm going to get this. And so most people start to realize within the spiritual aspect that their day, by the end of their day, they are spent. Like, for me, at the end of the day, I'm more energized than I was.
Yeah, I am too. And I can't sleep till like last 3 a.m. I have to force myself to sleep.
And that is the accumulation of that substance we call the primordial state. This is the currency. And so you should never, ever tap into your constitution. But furthermore, you start with
because you'll only deplete it. You will end up depleting it and getting sick.
Well, yes, and what happens is people can't differentiate between
that's the point,
unification and said their own energy.
Yes,
and so a lot of young energy healers, they get really fired up and they start using.
What's the litmus test on that, son? What's the litmus test to distinguish?
The first test is you've got to identify what happens at the end of your day. Okay. Let's be very clear. Let's be very sober. Lao Tzu always talks about this. The first point of healing is being accountable for your behavior. It's kind of like when and I refer to the diet as an example because people are like, well, I don't really eat anything. And I'm like, really? Okay. No, I'm not. Well, write down everything you eat because everything is an autonomous behavior until otherwise noted. And they come back and they look at their diet for a day and they're eating, a candy bar and, 5 cups of this and some takeout and whatever. And they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea I was doing that. This is the very evidence, right? So when you're in a state that is overwhelmed, the human condition, you will get evidence at the end of your day that you are spent, which furthermore gives you insight that this is being leached from your field because your intention is being drawn to the emotional state, which is part of this currency. So that's the beginning. Then you start with the simplicity of a beginning and end of your day, which can come with something as infantile as breath and refined as a system. There are thousands of breath techniques that we use with the Taoists. I'm sure it's the same with you. And so something as simplistic as that and removing evidence of distraction, i.e. electrical devices, things of that nature. Wake up and just be with your breath. Go to sleep, and before going to sleep, be with your breath. These are simple techniques that will instantly gather and accumulate that substance. But, the most important thing is you have to be real and be accountable for your behavior, or you will be in the 5% conscious, 95% unconscious sort of state of mind.
I find for myself, I like to go to bed with a shavasana. I teach shavasana a certain way, to the yogic sort of corpse position, but also I have this way of teaching relaxation with that. So yoga nidra, in a sense, I guide myself through that, the whole of, but through breath. And when I wake up in the morning, I find that I need a certain amount of time to still be lying there and just tuning into the breath. And you mentioned that. Now I just do that, naturally. It's just something I love to do. And if I don't do that in the mornings, I don't make a little bit of space before I get out of bed to do that, I find I haven't quite woken up properly. So I think I haven't quite aligned the part of me that was out of body and then, is now, I've kind of got all bits of my energy back into myself. So I find that really, really helps. I want to talk about, I'm really, really interested in this. What are your thoughts on energy protection, shielding? And I don't want to come from the space of being afraid or fear of other people vamping off you and that kind of thing. Although people, I think when you're very sensitive, that has happened. I've had happened to me. I've noticed that when I haven't been entirely fully present, I suspect maybe something has happened. But what are your thoughts on making sure that your energy is intact and fully sealed before you start going out for your day, before you start serving other people or being around other people? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. There's nothing more powerful than the prayer once you electrify the linguistics. So the words within a scripture will come off the page and they will surge and infuse deep within the core of yourself, which is the center point, the vesica point, the heart. And so you cannot be any more empowered than getting a very deep nature of understanding of that electromagnetism. It always comes back to that. But if you enter with fear will present itself. Fearlessness comes from a knowing. That knowing comes from a method. The method comes from the cultivational practices, because you, until otherwise noted, are working within this human condition. So you will perceive reality as such that there is a polarizing effect. It's within you, within the programming, to have what we perceive as a hetero action, which you start, you must finish. This is the human condition. So no matter what, if I put my hand out and I reach out towards you, you will feel compelled to shake my hand. I beg the audience to go out and open a door and see whether they can just walk through it without closing it. It's a compelling nature of the human condition to complete what they have started. And this furthermore it present itself as limited, but as you start to acquire the self-realized and self-knowing through the energetic potential, because you want to be able to materialize things. It's all transitory. It's really it's a psychological state of delusion until otherwise noted. You have to be able to materialize something. You can keep talking to yourself and telling yourself, "Oh, this is great," and I believe in something higher, and energy is fantastic. But until you're mastered, until you can validate it, it means nothing.
You can hold it.
You must be able to. That's the resonance that is critical. But so when you talk about protection, that still in of itself identifies as the human condition.
Yeah.
Because the need to, you are me, I am you. What am I afraid of? We are one. We've exhibited that through this whole conversation. The communion that we are resonating in shows within that electromagnetism. We can feel the pulsating and oscillating energy that both of us are creating as that unified state. And it's there, it's present. It's unconditional, it's abundant, timeless, endless, limitless. Yet when someone comes from a state of perfection or need to complete, you can instantly identify as the human condition. And let's be very clear, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone must start somewhere.
Well, it has to. You have to.
The two.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you have to move through that to arrive into that state of wholeness that you can hold long enough, and then throughout the day. And that does take something. And I feel like that is part of that is the whole journey. It's like learning to hold that, right? So that's why I'm asking the question, is that people do have the experience of coming from that human condition, as you call it, where there is fear, where there is duality, there is separation between one person and another. and whether it's perceived or otherwise, for them, it's a reality, right? It's a reality that's there. And I've seen people get drained, people being around certain individuals, and some people are definitely more imposing than others in their energetic signature, let's say. And so, they are not as considerate in their energetic signature as perhaps they might ought to be, to take into account the sensitivity and sensibilities of different individuals. And so as a result of that, some people do end up being deficient in their own prana, at the end of the day. And so that's why the question about how do I manage that how does one manage that until they're able to master that state of Wu Qi or that state of Atman?
So, we regress back to the emotional state, because that's really the vacuous point that people identify with when they come across what we call a psychic vampire, Karen, whatever you want to call it. This is what social media has created, right? And, you will feel this evidence. And, I take people through this journey of going, well, let's start with something as simplistic as, how do you know your thoughts are yours? And so this is first I start with, it's like, hang on a second. Whoa. Well, what does that mean, Jifu? Well, let's talk about that, because you are being commandeered, your attention, intention all day long. And the periphery is always being acquired. So I sometimes I'll use little examples of how quickly you're absorbing information that is not of any value or evidence of such to your own journey. So, I'll do something like this. And if I do that, and they're like, well, what are you doing? Now I'm going to ask you a question. They're like, okay, think of something, anything. And then they go, okay. I'm like, let me guess. It was an orange. And they're like, whoa. How did you know that? And I'm like, oh. And then I'll pull my hand up, and right in the corner of my hand, tiny print will be orange. And they're like, whoa, how is that possible? Because I just did this. How is that possible that you can absorb that information and then be commandeered to have a thought process where you believe you are creating this idea in your mind? Yeah. This is very evidence of the ability to absorb. You're absorbing information all day long. You might, it's all speculative, but let's say 100, 200,000 points of information all day long. You're absorbing it. You are aware of 7 and you retain 2. Now, this is more a psychologist, neurologist sort of perspective, but it gives more said evidence of this state. Now, you want to commandeer, you want to merge as this unified state. To do that, you must acquire, as we talked about, frequency. And once you obtain a frequency from a brain state, you can transmute this frequency, and it's measured in these things that they call beta, alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, lambda. These are states of awareness, and it's transmuted through the brain. Furthermore, I've measured my brain waves for many years, and when I witness physical healings, I normally are between 100 to 400 hertz, which is a frequency. That's all it is. It's like, hang on a second, I wasn't like getting all fired up. Or there's other people that have talked about, states of consciousness. I think there was a guy named Hawkins who had a scale of consciousness, and I would love to have a conversation with him.
David Hawkins?
Yes. And even in the spirit realm, we can have this conversation. So he acquires the consciousness state as being 1,000 hertz. Now, I can see a physical healing at 100 to 400. It happens all day long. It transmutes through my physical body. I feel a resonance that is beyond this electromagnetism. And it transmutes that way. Heat, water, fire, wind, earth, metal, all absorbed in that state of now. And you're able to see it transmute. You acquire. So for a gamma brainwave, for example, that is 100% consciousness from a from a neurology perspective, from a brainwave perspective. You're acquiring imperium over all things. That means you can dip into alpha, data, epsilon while conscious. This is the evidence of the scientific sort of like map of what goes on with the brain. But it's a frequency. That's it. So you were going to say?
I was going to say, could you describe some of, let's take one of your experiences in these different states.
Right.
Share one of your esoteric states when you have experienced yourself. Are you able to articulate that?
Sure. I mean, this is sort of a common thing when I talk to channelers because, I've probably got collectively in my Rolodex now 50 to 100 what I consider legitimate, real deal OGs. And there's a consensus. There's a transmuted like state of basically energy, frequency, vibration that will come down from above the heavens saturate into physical body, where you have this whole waterfall of like expansive oscillating energy that will saturate right down to the very subatomic level, and it will start to transmute and oscillate from you. You're emitting this. Anyone around you is going to feel that resonance, is going to experience it. They can palpate the energy. It goes right down into the core of you, and you start to present and see and witness what people would consider miracles.
Are you aware that as you're speaking about it right now, your third eye is wide open? Are you aware? I can see it here. It's absolutely glowing here. I'm like really glowing.
Yeah.
And it's not just the light, because there's lights around you,
Yeah.
but it's as you've been talking about the state, your third eye in particular has literally just gone.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the sensory perception that we develop, right? This is part of.
Calm down now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start to notice these things where, Smita is seeing this deeper level of sensory perception, whether it starts with the simplicity of the five senses, and then all bets are off because I can say something and hear it and say it and see it in my mind. There's three more right there. So now we're up to 8, and it's really the imagination is the portal to that creation. Right. So when you saturate, it is in a visceral, kinesthetic, somatic experience that will be experienced by myself, by the recipient, or any audience that are around me. That is, it comes in that oscillating form of heat, expansion, cold, expansion. This is the unity of these two incredible states. And you will see it physically. It will present itself in a manifestation, magic, healing. And furthermore, we talked about the magical state, which is a really refined state of working with all the grids and all the energy potential within this material. And that goes really deep because it's completely subject to the limitation of the human condition. So when you cast magic, say, for example, you were talking about protection, the need to protect yourself. Whenever I'm in process of cultivating and casting magic through my relationship with my immortal celestial teachers, this is about the framework of the mirroring effect of Earth to the universe. It's a micro version of the cosmos, and you channel the constellations so they work in line with all the grids that run through the Earth. So we're working with power centers, we're working with vortices, we're working with grid lines, ley lines. These are all present. And when you're able to attune that, all of a sudden you can direct the energy in any way you choose to, which would be that self-evidence. And most people don't realize that when people are, have nefarious intention and they're creating these things from a low frequency, it will present itself as such. And if you are in this situation where you believe a certain thing, which it's always good to have a progression. It's like First, you start with inquiry, then curiosity, then hope, then belief system. And then, of course, knowing is derived from that belief system by self-evidence, self-realization, and repeatable experiences. That's how it becomes realized as a knowing. But, this is where people get caught up with that emotional content. And the evidence will be, if you walk under a ladder and you believe it's going to give you bad luck, it will give you bad luck. If you walk under a ladder and you believe it's going to give you good luck, it will show itself as.
Totally agree with you on that. It's truly about perspective, and it's truly about beliefs and whatever you hold. Because the universe, as you mentioned very much earlier on, was the universe is indiscriminate. It doesn't have a perspective. The universe just is. And that you say X, it'll say, great, you want X, we'll deliver it. Whether that X is a good thing or a bad thing, you said it, I'll give it to you. So it does tend to rather work like that. I just find that sometimes we are not conscious, and people are not conscious of what it is that they believe, or what there's a lot of these things are in their blind spots. And yet this is where sanskars and, these types of things come in from the way that the rishis have described it, the ancient Indians have described it, is that there are certain beliefs that we have entrenched so deeply, like, volcanic craters that leave imprints, or perhaps meteors that land on our planet. And we see evidence of that millennia later. That's how the jivatman, the soul, the spark of consciousness that transmigrates from body to body, carries that when it's deep enough, when the belief is deep enough, good or bad and the ugly, by the way, not just the negative. And that's why I'm asking the question, because a lot of the times we can say it's the human condition, but I'm interested, my whole life and everything that I'm learning for myself and that I serve others with is really about freeing people from the trappedness of that which is in their blind spots, in their blind, the things that in that angle they can't actually see is driving them. And the beliefs are so strong, they will die for those beliefs. And yet those beliefs are so, to everybody else, they can see how negative they are, or how disempowering they are, or how they don't help the are you okay there?
Yeah, I just went, the battery on the laptop was dying. I was like, oh my God.
You plugged it in. Yeah. So that's my point, is that people are often given by that which is in their blind spots. And that's the thing that trips human beings up, So it's wonderful to have the Tao, and it's wonderful to have the path of light. It's wonderful to have the path of a higher consciousness to guide us into that. But sometimes the beliefs are so strong, so entrenched, that it's not coming from the conscious mind. It's deeply buried in the subconscious, in in the soul conscious, the transmigrating soul brings that with you. That's the reason why I was asking the questions. And I find those are the sticky ones. When I wrote the 3 books with regard, Karma and Diamonds, as to how that journey works, and how how do you find your way out of those very deep, sticky karmic trenches, and
I mean, I was going to say karma is a really interesting one, because we probably perceive it differently. From a Taoist perspective, the karmic model is quite simple. It's not in lack of fear. The karmic model is very much a transmuted state that you will have realized. And furthermore, I mean, we got back to past lineages, past lives. That still stays in the category of belief system.
Yes.
So the belief system can transmute to a knowing through evidence. So your evidence can change. Once we reach perfection, that can be altered permanently. So something that you may have realized that was deep within a lineage that was many lives over, you can alter that instantly.
By moving into that unified state, by moving into that Wu Chi state, as you say, or we would call that, that just beyond the veil, stepping onto the other side, that is how you do break the pattern. And I think that itself, San, takes a high level of mastery. That takes a level of mastery. And so the masses may never make that leap, may never actually attain that level. And that's why I'm trying to make it more accessible. My journey is to really make it like now. You can do it now. So you're absolutely right. I'm fully aware that, where the belief systems go across, whether it's past lives or karma or this or that. But why it's useful to understand, if it's something where that you are conditioned by, then it's important to understand how it works before you can drop it and move beyond it. Now, when I do also know that, there comes a point when sometimes you just say, enough of the bullshit, all of it, enough. Okay. I'm ready now and I'm jumping and that's it.
Well, you see that you make such a great point, because the self-inquiry gets to a point where, once again, human condition, right? So again, karma has a title, it has a definition, which is still in this inquiry of, well, why am I here? And students always ask me that, and my answer is quite simple. Why not?
What else are you going to do? Where else are you going to be?
I mean, within the Taoist path, the self-realization ends in servitude, which you become an ambassador to planet Earth, just like all the different facets of the diamond within the cosmos is created by that. So there are residents and ambassadors to every aspect of the universe.
Yeah.
And we are just working or playing or creating in this very state. And those three states are quite different, working to playing and creating. And when you identify that, then all of a sudden things change. But you must realize that it's good to create a foundation. But then, as you said, enough of the bullshit. It really comes down to, yin and yang. So really the question, the only question you have is your glass half empty or half full? And then you go, whoa, hang on a second. Really? And then that really then brings us back to the resonance. Because once you acquire that state of half full, you hold that resonance as you refer to it. You hold that line and you keep expanding on that. So you just get it more and more and more and more to a point that you create serendipitous, synchronistic moments of realization that repeat themselves. And that's where the mastery comes in. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you mean there is no limit? No. The universe has no moral compass. This idea of karma is from the humanistic perspective of this value system. There is some type of effect. If you do this, this will happen. This is more a cause and effect, which if you understand that perfection is abundant, timeless, endless,
you
limitless.
Go beyond that. So there is that state of akarma, which is good karma, bad karma, and akarma, which is stepping beyond that you still do. Because karma ultimately just means action. Actually, I believe it's also the thought, because the thought has an impact and has also cause and effect. But really, that's the whole point of that journey. And I think karma has not been understood very well in the West, which is why I wrote the books. It really is really designed to attain self-mastery. It's really designed to let the human being understand that he or she is the master of her own destiny. And that's it. That's the whole point of it. But then beyond that destiny takes you into that higher state of, unified state beyond the yin, the yang, into that unification, what you call perfection. And so in order to get to that, we really need to understand that when we do something, we want to do it not for good of somebody else or for the bad of somebody else. We want to do it because that's what we do. And not be attached to the results or anything, like not even consider the results of that. It is simply, I do X and then I move on. I do Y and then I move on. You are now creating that state of not being affected. You're now stepping outside the zone of cause and effect when you start to do that. That's the real mastery. And I think when we talk about self-mastery, a lot of what I understand about self-mastery, from my standpoint is, it's really the beginning. We're really the babies as human beings, beginning our journey into our divinity. That self-mastery is really the mastery of that human element, the mind itself, which is just a whirlpool. And we're saying, well, let's go beyond the world, as Patanjali says, it's Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, is that the whirlpool of the mind will keep you trapped and going round and round and round. We want to get beyond that. So what do we do? How do we do that? And that is that whole thing, the journey of self-mastery. But once that mastery, you attain the ability to actually manage the mind effectively and the emotions effectively. And then we're back to square one, because now we're at the bottom of the ladder of, oh my goodness, now I'm a limitless being,
Well, it's just getting the result. Like for me, it's like, I want to see physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. When that transmutes before my very eyes as some supernatural experience, which I've been experiencing for 30 years, it's very normal. I mean, my children are programmed to instantly acquire, one of their siblings falls and scratches their elbow or gets a fat lip,
to heal
and they will instantly come together like X-Men. And they'll all tune into the frequency, and you'll watch that physical flesh transmute back to its original default in the same second, because that's how quickly it happens. That's the truth. And I always remind people that something as simplistic as like metal bending would be the closest to the visual transmutation. So when you see that, your attention, intention comes to a focal point where you're looking beyond the actual experience, and then things just instantly transmute before your very eyes. So the flesh will wiggle and shape and reform. You will think you're hallucinating until you witness the scar, the cut, the distortion, broken bones, whatever, and you'll watch it go right back to its original state. And then when it is evident before you by the recipient, by yourself, there's nothing denied. It's just a sobering reality of what the truth is.
So and then becoming supernatural, becoming supranatural, as I think Joe Dispenza would call it, and the rishis would say exactly the same thing. I think you're talking about the X-Men state is that supernatural state, perhaps.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to be realized. I mean, all of this is conceptual, and so when you go through different facets of that, giving evidence of it from psychic abilities, sensory perception, all these types of things, these are all important to validate what it is that you're experiencing, or it's just a deluded transitory state of something that's unreal.
Guide it intentionally as opposed to randomly. San, we have been talking almost 1.5 hours, which time has flown by.
Excellent. Great.
And I'm so grateful to you. I mean, I could really keep talking for another 2 hours, and we would still not have really answered all the questions. So I have a whole pile of questions here in front of me, which I didn't get to ask because we just flowed in the conversation.
And it was
beautiful. Absolutely. Really honored. I'm absolutely honored to have you share your wisdom, your mastery, and please let's stay in touch and we'll speak again. But thank you so much for joining me. I'm really grateful to you.
I'm very grateful for you, and I'm very grateful for this moment. And we'll continue our conversation, and I should have you back on the channel and really go into a lot of other things. A lot of interesting things are transpiring right now in my reality, which I find really interesting. Well, not really. I created it, but anyway.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you off channel or off recording with that if you want to hear about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.